r/nosleep. Posted by you/Rosie_Roz3. Why I stopped working at the morgue. Up until about a year ago, I was a mortician. Many know that morgues are more of a family business, and it is inherited by family members. My situation was no different. But there were a few rules that had to be followed. Rule number 1, no prepping the bodies from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. This rule made it to where there was nobody at the morgue past 11:30 at night. On the few occasions that a person arrived at the morgue at those times, the only person who would prepare them would be my grandmother. Nowadays some morgues no longer have a night shift and hours follows that suit except with my grandmother. If someone needed to be prepped, she'd be the one to do it no matter the hour of night. Rule number 2, when entering or leaving any room or even the morgue itself, you are supposed to say hello and goodbye. I never understood this rule, but I never dared to question. Rule number 3, never forget to wear your family protection amulet. This rule was the most important and stressed rule. These amulets were passed down in my family to any who worked at the morgue. My grandmother always said that they protect us from the unnatural world. While I never really had much belief in the unnatural world, I never went against the rules. My grandmother also stressed I had to believe in the amulet so it'd work. For her, I did believe in it a bit. During the time I worked at the morgue, I noticed that I was the only one who ever had stuff happen to them. It was nothing too serious, just the misplacement of an item or my car keys. It never bothered me and I brushed it off as my family members pulling a prank on me. That was until about 2 weeks before I quit. A person had come in at night past 12 a.m. and my grandmother, who usually prepared them, was in the hospital. No one else who worked there wanted to go, so I did. I know, they sounded highly unprofessional, but everyone in my family stuck to rules very religiously. I came in and immediately noticed something off about the morgue. It looked the same as it does in the day, but it didn't feel the same. I shivered at the cold that surrounded me and just focused on getting the person prepped. As I worked, I felt something stare me down, but I never saw anything. Things I needed would get misplaced and I had to go search for them. This made it take longer to get done. By 3 a.m. I had finally finished. I placed the body in the refrigerated mortuary cabinet and got ready to leave. I was walking back to the lobby when the lights shut off. They came back on after about 3 minutes and the morgue now looked more old and rundown. I tried looking out the window, but it was completely black, no sign of the street lamp. It was almost like an alternate version of itself. I felt sick to my stomach and brushed the thought aside as I hurriedly headed for the door. I tried to open it, but it was locked. I kept turning it until I heard the sounds of nails scraping against the wall behind me. I turned around slowly and there stood a humanoid entity. There wasn't much I could see of it since it was covered in a swirling black mist. With it came the smell of death and sulfur. I gagged at the smell. It started walking closer, scraping its nails against the wall. I tried the door again, but it wouldn't budge. Feeling hopeless, I grabbed the amulet and started praying. It laughed. "That won't work, you don't truly believe." Its laugh and voice were awful. Like metal being crushed together, and it sounded like multiple people were speaking at once at different octaves. As it passed by the windows, they cracked and shattered, spraying me with the glass. I began to cry as I felt like my life was going to end. I held the amulet tighter and prayed harder. It rushed at me and grabbed me. "Like I said, that won't work. You're in my world now." I struggled through the fear and sobs. What do you mean? This place has been a portal to hell before it was ever a morgue. Why do you think there were those stupid rules? It laughed. I had turned completely cold. It raised its clawed hand up and stabbed it into my stomach. I shuddered as I felt the pain burn through my body. I felt my body go limp as I passed out. When I woke, I was where I was previously, but the morgue looked the same as it does in the day. It no longer looked run down and off. There were no signs of that entity, just the shards of glass on the floor. I went to get up, but a sharp pain shot through me. I looked down and on my stomach were 3 claw marks seared into my skin. My skin was a weird charcoal black color and it smoldered where the entity had stabbed me. The glass from the windows was embedded into my arms as well. Slight blood trickled from some of the cuts, but they were nothing compared to nasty seared black scars on my stomach. I got up and went into the lobby. I checked the clock and it was 5:01 a.m. I had been out for about 2 hours. I quickly got my car keys and left. When I got home, I first cleaned my seared stomach and wrapped it, and then pulled the embedded glass from my arms. I cleaned the cuts and wrapped them and went to my room and fell asleep on my bed. After that, I was sick for 2 weeks. When I was sick, I refused to see any of my family members. I didn't know how they would react if they knew I had gotten sick after I had gone to the morgue after 12 a.m. My grandmother had recovered and she was the one who tried to contact me the most. The 3 claw marks were still on my skin. They looked like black burn scars. I could barely sleep at night from the recurring nightmares of that entity. Once I felt better, I visited my grandmother and told her I was quitting. She didn't ask any questions and it almost seemed like she already knew why. The only thing she said was, "When you are ready, I'll listen." I left her house in tears. I'm sure she knew I had an encounter with that entity. Did she ever encounter it? Or did her belief keep her safe? I didn't know the answer. But I am convinced that the entity was the reasoning for the weird rules at the morgue. About 3 months ago I told my grandmother what had happened and she consoled me and placed what she called a protection prayer over me. After everything that happened, I hold a strong belief in the unnatural world or the unseen world or whatever you want to call it. I still have night terrors very often and suffer from insomnia due to the night terrors, but I'm getting help with that. Stay safe out there people and don't assume that everything is as it appears. Posted by you/Rosie_Roz3. I woke up in a shallow grave after my wife tried to kill me. It was cold and I could feel water and mud surrounding my body. I dared not to open my eyes. My time was limited as I felt my head get dizzy from the lack of oxygen. I kept myself from panicking as I struggled and removed myself from the muddy confines and dug. I finally no longer felt mud and struggled to the surface. Pulling myself from the ground, I looked around at my surroundings. It was a barren field. It was night and it was storming. The rain quickly washed away the mud from my face. What had happened? My head throbbed as if it had been hit. Memories of what happened prior flashed through my mind. There was a woman who felt very familiar to me and another man. Who was he? I staggered away from my muddy grave and searched for help. Somebody had tried to kill me but failed, I presumed. I shivered as my rain-soaked clothes grew cold from the wind. After walking for about 15 minutes I found a highway. I walked alongside it until some light shined on me. I stopped and turned, squinting at the bright lights. The person got out of their car and ran up to me. "Mark, what are you doing here? The whole town has been looking for you, for the past day. Your wife reported you missing. What happened?" I staggered away from him in fear. "Who are you?" He looked taken aback. "It's me, your friend from high school, Phil. Don't you remember me?" The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't recall much about this man, Phil. I shook my head at his question. "Well, surely you remember your wife, Jennifer. Don't you?" he asked instead. I thought for a moment. Her name sounded familiar and I felt like I knew her, but my head continued to throb painfully. "I guess this ain't important at the moment. Let's get you out of this rain," the man, Phil, said as he led me to the passenger door of his vehicle. I got in and he drove us into town. "Let's take you to the ER first, get you checked out." "Hey, Phil, who is Jennifer?" I asked with a scratchy voice. He looked flabbergasted. "Jennifer is your wife, you've been married for about 8 years now. You and her were high school sweethearts. How can you not remember?" I rubbed my head. "I don't know, my head hurts a lot." I was brought into the ER and a nurse took me to a bed. "Just lay here for now, Mark, I'll hook you up to N4 to get you some fluids." I nodded my head, showing her I understood what she was saying. A doctor walked in. "Hey Mark, can you tell me if you are hurt anywhere?" "The back of my head keeps throbbing painfully," I said. The doctor looked at my head. "You have a gash on the back of your, nothing is broken but you'll need stitches." I nodded my head. "Okay." The doctor then asked, "Mark, do you know what day it is?" I thought for a moment but no date came to mind. "No, I don't." The doctor sighed. "I heard from Phil you don't know who he or your wife is. Do you recognize me or the nurse?" "No, who are you?" I asked. "I'm one of your high school friends, Scott. This is my wife, Olivia," he said. "You both sound familiar, but I'm sorry I can't really recall much," I stated. "All right, that's fine Mark. We're gonna get you fixed up, don't worry about a thing," Scott said. He cleaned the wound on my head and numbed it up. He then stitched it up. "All right Mark, we are going to keep you in the hospital for now to make sure there are no further problems. It seems like you have dissociative amnesia. You can't remember things about yourself or your friends and family. This shouldn't last too long, hopefully you'll recover from it quickly." I nodded my head. "Thank you." "All right, get some rest Mark, glad to have you back safely," Scott said. I felt my eyes grow heavy as exhaustion set in. I fell asleep. I had a confusing dream where the woman had hit me in the head with a shovel. I then saw myself get dragged. Is this what happened to me? Who did it? Light shined in my eyes and I woke up. It was no longer raining and was actually a sunny day. The nurse from last night, Olivia, came in. "Hey Scott, how are you doing? I brought you some breakfast, hope you're hungry," she said as she sat my food down on the table and then extended it across me. I smiled. Thank you, I'm starving. By the way, we've contacted your wife, she'll be here to get you once you can be discharged, she added before she left. I ate my food and waited patiently for the tray to be taken. This time both Scott and Olivia came. Olivia got my tray as Scott checked me out. You look good, your vitals are all normal and you no longer have slight signs of dehydration. I believe you can be discharged today. I'll have Olivia call your wife and let her know, Scott said. I nodded, okay, thank you. Scott took the fourth out and left the room. After about 30 minutes, Scott walked in with another woman. Mark, this is your wife, Jennifer. I already told her about your amnesia, so don't worry, Scott said. She held a thing of clothes in her hand, but her facial expression looked like she was extremely nervous and scared. Looking at her, my head throbbed once more and I felt a feeling of betrayal. But betrayal of what? She held the clothes out to me. Here is a change of clothes. Go change into them so I can sign you out. She said it in a rush. Odd, but I dismissed it. I smiled and grabbed the clothes and went to change into them. Once I changed into them, I followed her out to the front desk where she signed me out. She led me out to a car and drove home. Honey, how about you go lay down to rest? You must be tired from everything that happened, Jennifer said. No, I feel fine, really, I responded. She forced a smile. No, seriously, I insist, just go rest. She led me to the couch and had me lay down. She placed a blanket over me and ushered me to sleep. For some reason, her trying to usher me to sleep made my hair stand on end. I decided to go along with it and close my eyes even though I wasn't tired. She left the room and not shortly after I heard her on the phone with someone, I don't know. I thought that a hit to his head would have killed him. There was a pause and then she said, yeah, I can't believe it. We went through all that trouble and he is still alive. Ugh, just get over here so we can deal with this properly. What the hell was she talking about? And just like a light bulb coming on, fear trickled down my spine as everything came back to me. One day prior, I had just gotten home. I had gotten off a little early, so I wanted to surprise Jennifer with some flowers. I walked through the door but didn't see her. I know she is here, her car is out front. I checked the kitchen, the laundry room, and the backyard but nothing. I was walking up the stairs when I heard some sounds from our bedroom. I rushed to the room and opened the door. There, in our bed, was my wife and some man I didn't even know. She gasped and tried to cover up. Mark, it's not what you think. I promise. I felt disappointed, hurt, and betrayed. Yeah, whatever. Don't let me interrupt you. I'll just leave. I dropped the flowers on the floor and turned and walked away. I started to walk down the stairs when I felt some hard and heavy collide with the back of my head. I fell down the stairs and glanced up to see my wife with a shovel in hand and the man right by her. Oh God, what do we do? She said, freaking out. My vision was going black as I felt my body being pulled. I woke up for a moment to see myself getting dragged into that barren field. I was afraid and had no idea what would happen. I soon blacked out again. And that's what I last remember until I woke up and crawled from that muddy grave. Present day. I sat straight up off the couch. The man hadn't yet arrived and Jennifer was pacing in the kitchen. When I entered, she turned pale white. Mark, did you hear anything? She stammered out. I heard everything and I know enough. How could you cheat on me and then attempt to kill me? I said. It's not what you think, I was forced to, she cried. You can tell your story to the police. They'll be here any minute, I said. She stopped her crying and in an instant grabbed a kitchen knife and charged at me. I grabbed her arms to keep her from stabbing me. I heard sirens off in the distance that were getting closer. I twisted the knife out of her hand and it clattered on the floor. She tried scratching me and biting me. If only you had stayed dead, this wouldn't have happened. I could have been happy. She screeched out. Do you hear yourself? You sound crazy, I said, both angry and fearful. The police busted into the house and tased her. I let her go and let them tend to her. I walked outside to give my testament and saw that man handcuffed in the back of a police car. How could the woman I loved try to kill me? I thought she loved me, but I guess not. After giving my testament, I saw Phil walk over. Hey, I heard what happened. Are you all right? He asked. Yeah, I guess, I responded. Maybe things will be all right. Posted by you/Rosie_Roz3. Our friend's secret is deadlier than we thought. Didn't Jude seem off to you guys? I asked. What do you mean, Amy? He was just startled we showed up at his doorstep without telling him beforehand, Riley answered. I don't know, he seemed more shocked than what he should have been, I replied. Rebecca huffed, it's Jude, Of course he'd act oddly. Don't be like that, we all know how unsocial Jude is, he was probably just surprised is all, Riley said. While I didn't say anything more, I found Jude's recent behavior odd. Sure, he is antisocial, but he has been more shut in and reserved from us these past few months. When we do see him, he seems off, like he is anxious. He gets so anxious sometimes he ends up leaving our gatherings. I heard a ding and looked at my phone. What is it? I'd rather not look since I'm driving, Riley said. It was Jude, he messaged the group chat. It's Jude, he said he'd like to hang out with us at a cabin in the mountains. As a way to apologize for his recent behavior. That sounds awesome, tell him I'm in, Riley said. Well, it can't hurt, and Jude is doing this to apologize for his behavior. I messaged him back that both me and Riley were in. What about you, Rebecca? You're coming as well, right? I asked. She rolled her eyes. I guess, I can't let you fools go by yourself. She messaged the group chat that she was going as well. Jude messaged back. Jude said if it is alright if we all go this Saturday, I told Riley. Fine by me, Riley replied. I nodded my head and responded back to Jude. Riley dropped us all off at our homes. I walked in and turned the TV on. The news came on about the recent killings in the area. Who would be so sick to do that? I said. Days passed by until it was finally Saturday. Jude said he'd already be up at the cabin to get everything prepared. He gave the address of the cabin to Riley. Riley swung by and picked me up, and then we got Rebecca. The drive there didn't feel as long as it was, and when we finally got there it was midday. We pulled up and saw a nice cabin. Jude was sitting outside on the front porch. When he saw us pull up he got up. Riley parked the car and we all got out. Hi everyone, I'm glad you all could make it, Jude welcomed us. Yeah, no problem man, you know we wouldn't miss out on this, Riley replied. Really, thanks for this Jude, I said. It's alright, Rebecca said. Let me help with your bags, and then I'll show you around, Jude said. He grabbed a few bags and we all walked in. Once we had everything settled, Jude showed us around. The cabin looked more like a house than an actual cabin. How did you manage this? I asked. A friend of my dad's owns it, I got in contact with him and he rented it out for cheap to me, Jude answered. Wow, having connections is nice, Riley replied. Jude nodded. That's odd. Jude hardly speaks of his father. Why would he get in contact with his dad's friend just for us to hang out? Things felt so odd. Jude's behavior this week is even more odd than his previous behavior. Hours passed and we were sitting outside around a campfire. Just talking about random things and having a good time. Did y'all see on the news about the recent murders? I asked. Jude's facial expression immediately changed. How odd. Yeah, I saw it. What type of psycho would do something like that? Rebecca said. Riley nodded his head. Yeah, it's just sick. Jude cleared his throat. Yeah, it's horrible. But I brought you all here to relax, let's not focus on stuff like that. Why was he trying to change the topic? Is it uncomfortable for him or is it something more? Totally agree with you for once, I'd rather not think about that, Rebecca said. Same here, Riley replied. Sorry for bringing it up, I just wanted to make sure you all were aware, I answered. No, don't worry about it, we all know you meant well, Jude said. After that we talked about more random stuff before we headed off to bed. I was asleep in bed when I heard a muffled scream. I shot out of bed and grabbed my phone for light. I crept out of my bedroom towards Riley's room. Riley came out of his room with a baseball bat. Did you hear that? He asked. I nodded. Didn't it sound like Rebecca to you? We rushed over to Rebecca's room to see a horrible sight. She had been murdered. Her eyes were wide open with fear. Her chest had so many stab wounds you could almost see in it. We heard someone come up behind us and turned around. It was just Jude, he looked like he just woke up. He looked past us and saw Rebecca and paled instantly. What happened to Rebecca? Did you see anything, Jude? Riley asked. Jude peeled his eyes off of Rebecca and looked at Riley. And no, I heard muffled screams and went to check on y'all, but you weren't in your rooms, so I was coming here to check on Rebecca. Who did this? We didn't know who would do this. Aren't we the only ones up here? I asked. We were supposed to be the only ones here. Do you think there is someone else here? Jude responded. Amy, go back to your room and find whatever weapon you can. Lock yourself in the room. Jude and I will search around for whoever did that to Rebecca. If you get any cell service, call the police, Riley said. Are you sure about this? I asked. They both nodded their heads. I sighed, alright, fine. But what should I do if someone knocks on the door and I'm not sure if it is either of you? A secret code. You'll say bears, and if it is either one of us, we will say cougars, Jude said. Alright, you both be safe, I said and headed back to my room. I kept watch of the time, but more than an hour passed and I heard no one outside. I unlocked my door and walked out of my room. I saw no signs of anyone. Did the killer get them both? I walked around on the first floor and then headed up to the second floor. I shined my light in the den and on the floor laid Riley. Riley, unlike Rebecca, seemed to have been killed in a more peaceful way. He didn't have so many stab wounds, but he had a big slice on his neck. His blood had already pooled around him. Tears that wanted to fall when I saw Rebecca finally fell as my knees hit the floor. I heard the floorboard creak behind me and saw Jude's silhouette. Jude, we need T to leave. The killer got her, Riley, I said through sobs. Jude said nothing as he walked closer to me. Jude? This isn't funny, I said. Actually it is, he said as I grabbed my phone light and shined it on him. He looked quite pleased with himself. He had blood coated on his clothes. Jude, what is the meaning of this? I asked. He propped his chin on his hand before he laughed. Well, you see, I couldn't have y'all figuring out what I had done and telling the police. So what better way to silence you than to do it permanently? You mean, you are the one behind those murders? I asked. Bingo. I was just cleaning up when y'all arrived at my house, he said as his smile widened. I crawled away from him. You're a sick bastard. A very interesting opinion. It's the same as what the owner of this cabin said as well, he laughed maniacally. He walked closer to me. Stay back, I yelled. My back hit the wall. Fuck, I was trapped. Like a rabbit chased by a wolf, you have nowhere to go now, Jude said as he squatted before me. I fumbled my hands around until I felt something firm in my hand. I gripped it tight and waited for the perfect moment. I don't understand, they were your friends, why would you kill them? And why in such a way? I asked. Well, Rebecca died like that 'cause she was always a bitch to me, he responded. What about Riley? He was your best friend, I said. He smiled. It's because he was my best friend I killed him in the most painless way I knew of. He leaned towards me and I swung at his head. The bat connected with his head and he fell over. He didn't get up. I got up and ran to Riley's body and searched his pockets. I got his keys and ran to his car. I turned it on and floored it all the way to my house. I got home and locked my door. I breathed a sigh of relief and went to call the police on my phone. It was dead. That's fine, I can call the police on my house phone. I rushed to it, but it was dead as well. What the hell was going on? Then my lights cut off. My heart raced with fear. Surely it wasn't Jude. He was passed out when I left. He wouldn't be up for an hour at the least. The air turned frighteningly cold, which nipped at my skin. I looked around hoping to see something, but all I saw was darkness. I heard my floorboards creak behind me and felt warm air breathe against my neck. I froze up with fear. I told you, I'd silence you all permanently, Jude's disembodied voice said.